Yu-Gi-Oh! Has been an ongoing franchise since 1998 and has evolved from a dark manga about a lonely teenage boy who likes board games to one of the most successful trading card games ever released. One of the most diverse ways to enjoy this franchise, however, comes in the form of video games, which have varied mechanics, stories, and way to ogle cool monster designs. So let's take a walk through different kinds of games that exist throughout Yu-Gi-Oh's 20-year history, going from 1998 all the way through to 2021. And let's see exactly how we got here. Yu-Gi-Oh! Eternal Duelist Soul was released in Japan on July 5th, 2001. The US would receive this game on October 5th, 2002, which was actually before Dungeon Dice Monsters. In Japan, this game was released with the name Duel Monsters 5 Expert 1. This was the first title in what would become the Expert series, which were targeted more to people who wanted to simulate the actual card game rather than play a more story-based or anime rules-based video game. Eternal Duelist Soul was also the first simulator for TCG fans as well, although we would be receiving this game well into the physical card game's lifespan. Being the first game to also utilize the card polymerization and make some monsters actually dedicated fusion monsters like their physical counterparts, this game would create a divide in the kinds of experiences a Yu-Gi-Oh! Video game fan could have. Experiences that played with the aspects of the franchise in more unusual capacities like Dungeon Dice Monsters or the previous Duel Monsters titles, and experiences that let you play the actual card game. I know having fusion monsters is a weird comparison point, but we were also still pretending Yamadron was a card you ritual summoned, so demanding you use polymerization with a tainted wisdom and ancient brain to make Skull Knight just seems like such a big advancement in technology. Did you know those materials didn't even make Skull Knight and Forbidden Memories? Caveman behavior, they're both in the game, they should just... whatever. The promo cards for the Eternal Duelist Soul were Exchange, Graceful Dice, and Skull Dice. None of these cards had any particular effect competitively, but Exchange was a weird one that gave you and the opponent full hand knowledge of each other, and potentially a really good trade for the round. The dice cards were seen in the anime, and that is more or less how they stayed, although the cards themselves were printed in a very pretty prismatic secret rare foil. Duel Monsters 5 Expert 1 came with a random booster pack containing 3 of 5 total cards, which included the 3 previously mentioned cards, plus Big Shield Gardna and Dark Sage. Both cards are primarily seen in the anime, although Big Shield Gardna would see some play in playgrounds everywhere due to its monstrous defense. These cards were printed in a standard secret rare foiling. This game is a simulation of the OCG TCG card game. So you know what that means, everyone. It's time to actually learn how to play Yu-Gi-Oh! For a brief overview, the turn progresses in the following way. A draw phase, a standby phase, a main phase 1, a battle phase, main phase 2, and the end phase. Each player begins with a 5-card hand and draws 1 card during each draw phase. You can normal summon 1 monster on your turn, but you can special summon as many times as you are allowed by the cards in your hand. Each player has 8,000 life points and loses if they drop to 0. Seems simple enough, right? You can trade in battle with friends using a link cable, but more importantly, they have greatly improved the interface for editing your deck. For the first time, it is now imperative you find exactly the card you want in a snap. By creating a system in which you can easily filter for the card you need and switch between your trunk, deck, and side deck using L and R, they create a system that is so much faster than having to memorize the name or number from the Duel Monsters titles. This kind of system was previously only available in Forbidden Memories, but even that was just filtering for type and attack most of the time. We'll talk about the deck edit menus as we go along, so just think of this one as the baseline for future games, because they will get, interesting as we go along. On top of your journey to beat each duelist a few times, there are also weekly events that occur on an in-game calendar. There's a weekly tournament every other Saturday, and each duel you compete moves the calendar forward a day. Every couple of in-game months, you can participate in some bigger tournaments, which actually ask you to compete in matches, a best 2 out of 3, rather than single duels. These include things like the national tournaments, being ambushed by a rare hunter where one of your rare cards is a stake, and the Grandpa Cup. You can even occasionally get a free pack in the mail, accompanied by a low-res scan of a Shonen Jump magazine. It's great. There are a few differences between the English and Japanese versions of these games. In Japan, Duel Monsters 5 would use mostly the same graphics except the main menu, playing area, and the booster packs. Interestingly, Duel Monsters 5 uses the actual Japanese boosters that were released up to that point, which is why there's only 5 cards per pack. The English versions would use the play area that was utilized for a later game, Stairway to Destined Duel, and would recolor the booster packs to be themed around card art rather than the booster packs themselves. There are some slight variations in cards received, but they are largely the same. These boosters are unlocked in-game by completing various conditions, like beating Yugi a bunch of times, or beating Joey a bunch of times, or beating Kaiba, but you get it. One unlocks after collecting one of each card. I don't know why that happens, considering you have all of the cards. But, it happens. An interesting note about the Stage 5 Duelist for this game: only an intelligent dueling robot is unlocked initially, but the others can be unlocked by completing conditions in-game, like getting a copy of Toon World, and that unlocks Pegasus for you to fight. Pegasus, hilariously, is programmed to be able to read what cards you have in your hand and the ones that are face down on the field. Unfortunately, this doesn't really change the computer's strategy at all for playing the game, other than avoiding face-down monsters that it can't otherwise destroy. You can also unlock Simon Murin, the real protagonist of this series, as previously covered, by winning a tournament held in November, and this consequently unlocks Grandpa, who is called Truesdale in this, who can only be unlocked by collecting one of every card in the game. If you defeat Simon Murin, you unlock one of every card in the game, in case that wasn't clear. There are actually some cards that don't function entirely correctly in the game. Famously, Imperial Order just doesn't work with computer players. They can still activate spell cards just like normal. You can also apparently activate Change of Heart twice, and this makes the first monster you stole permanently yours because the Change of Heart just doesn't resolve correctly. Passwords have also returned for this game, and almost all of them work, save for a handful. A password will get you one copy of a card in the pool so long as you don't already have one in your trunk. This makes it so that you do actually have to play the game to get multiples of better cards, but you can give yourself a nice head start if you know the right cards to put in. This video game operates off of the relevant limited list. What? Oh silly, didn't you know? When this game was new, no cards were banned, only limited. There were a number of limited cards including Pot of Greed and Mirror Force, as well as some semi-limited cards. A card would not be banned for another little bit of time. This game includes a card set up to the OCG Core Set Booster Pack, Curse of Anubis, which is equivalent to Pharaoh's Servant in the TCG. It also includes cards from the premium packs. Notably, this early in the game, archetypes didn't really exist yet, so a lot of strategies you would see were called like good stuff decks. So in real life, at this point, you saw a lot of Sangan, Jinzo, Cyberstein, which was a prize card in the TCG initially, and Crush Card Virus, which was also a prize card in the TCG. There's a lot more cards that saw play, but this game includes a lot of chaff from the initial volume packs as well. This early in the game, strategies mostly revolved around getting out the previously mentioned monsters or some kind of hand control. And of course, just absolutely sacking your opponent with some sort of crush card turbo nonsense. We'll see a lot of strategies develop as we move forward, so look forward to more of this. Eternal Duelist Soul is still one of my favorite Yu-Gi-Oh games. It was the first one that actually asked me to learn to play the game for real, and for that, it will always be dear in my heart. Compared to the game today, it's obviously very limited in its card choice, but there were still over 800 cards in this game, and I'm positive at least half of those were worthwhile includes in a deck in some variety. It's nice to have a game in which it is not mandated that you defeat each duelist 5 times, because quite frankly, that's a tedious number just to see the next set of character art. Although the rewards for beating duelists multiple times are reduced compared to previous Duel Monsters titles, you do unlock packs by defeating duelists like Yugi and Joey 20 times. That's a large number, but the packs they unlock do have worthwhile cards in them. The weekly and monthly events are a great way to break up the action in a game that is otherwise solely about playing the card game. And this one in particular has one of those banger soundtracks that makes coming back for another duel all that much easier. The art is also a huge improvement over Dungeon Dice Monsters, returning to the more manga stylings from previous Duel Monsters titles. Overall, the presentation here is strong for Eternal Duelist Sol, and I would really recommend anybody play it that is interested at all in some serious caveman Yu-Gi-Oh! As we can see, the Expert series provides a great lens to not only talk about the video game, but aspects of the physical game that surrounded it. For a lot of kids, these Expert games would be the primary way they engaged with the card game if they didn't have access to buying booster packs or individual cards, especially since some of the more powerful single cards would fetch a pretty penny at a local game shop, if they even had any at all. Eternal Duelist Sol would also create a space for people who didn't want to engage in the physical game at a competitive level, but still wanted to play against somebody and get better. Eternal Duelist Sol is, unfortunately, the final entry that has the classic designs of Duel Monsters 1 through 4. Other titles will certainly ask you to beat Duelists to unlock other Duelists, but this is the end of the stages system that we've had thus far. In exchange, though, we get really expansive Duelist rosters for future titles, all with interesting decks of their own. The next game in the chronology is actually a follow-up to Forbidden Memories in terms of characters and aesthetic, and is certainly a fan favorite among the spin-off titles. I'll see you in the next one.